All right. Well, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. Before we start, I want to give a huge thank you to the team at the Andrew Goodman Foundation for having us this morning and for putting together this incredible two-day event. I hope you all have been enjoying and you were able to tune into the keynote this morning. I know I found it super interesting. My name is Erin and I'm part of the team at All In Together. And today we're really excited to be talking with you all about what's at stake for women in the 2022 elections and how we can engage women and our allies in this fight for a more equitable and inclusive democracy. So at AIT, quick background, we provide civic education and advocacy training for women across the country in order to equip and empower them to fully engage in the civic process. And so today we're really excited to dive in with you about women voters, young voters ahead of the 2022 elections. And we have a great panel from our team at AIT, and I'm so excited to introduce them all and get started with you. Before we dive in, we want to quickly reiterate that when we say all in together, we really mean all in together. So we are committed to supporting all women in their civic journeys. And when we say women, we mean all persons who through their gender expression identify as women, full stop. And we also know that women are as diverse as this nation. And so we strive to be aware of and sensitive to the different experiences of women based on their identities, racial, ethnic, religious, cultural, and other demographics by which women self-identify. So at AIT, we focus on empowering and uplifting these women's voices, particularly those who have been and continue to be silenced or underrepresented in our government. And of course, we enthusiastically welcome the support of our allies in this movement towards a more inclusive and equitable democracy. So it is my pleasure today to introduce this panel of brilliant women who are leading change in this arena. First up, we have Priya. Priya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Priya. I use she, her pronouns. I'm AIT's Director of Research. So a lot of what I do is kind of just going through our polling, and I think just to kind of, ground our context in this a little bit. I know, Erin, we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of personal journeys and a little bit about that. So I think just for me, I kind of probably was not, like, my journey is pretty similar to most of y'all's, I think, right? I was a college student kind of figuring out what I wanted to do and kind of was really learning the ways in which policy and politics kind of impact every level of our lives. And that's kind of how I got into this space in the beginning. So looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Priya. And then we have Guadalupe.
Thank you, Erin. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Guadalupe Gonzalez, and I am the Community Engagement Manager for All In Together. My pronouns are she, her, and I work with the grassroots programs in AIT, mainly a program named the Community Leadership Program, where we provide tools in civic education and try to engage underrepresented women who have mainly or historically been disengaged or not reached by traditional, tools. And we try to provide them with education, with support, with tools to empower them to start their civic journey and to believe in themselves and that they can make change.
Great. And then we have Vashti.
Hey everyone, I'm Vashti Rutledge. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm the executive director of MEEC, which is the Madisonville Education and Assistance Center. It's a small neighborhood-based nonprofit in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm also an AIT fellow from 2020. And so hopefully my perspective is shared from the position of someone who's gotten the benefit of working alongside the team at AIT and learning so much about how I can think differently about my own civic engagement, as well as what that's looked like and how it's shown up for me in my work on a day-to-day basis in my community. And I look forward to chatting with everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Vashti. And then I'm Erin, again, she, her pronouns. I'm a program and communications assistant here at All In Together. And I graduated from undergrad in 2020, and that's really when I became involved in this civic education and civic engagement work during my undergraduate years. And upon graduating, I was so happy to discover that there are organizations like AIT and the Andrew Goodman Foundation out there that are doing this difficult work. And so was very excited to join and continue working on these issues. So let's set up a little context for today's discussion. I think we can all agree it's been a difficult few years for all of us. I know I feel like when I read the news, I'm just encountering headlines like this. Maternal health, inflation, reproductive rights, violence. These are just a few examples of what's going on in our world today. We're grappling with multiple crises, and we also know that the impact of these crises are felt disproportionately by women. So we have to think what's going on here. We know that women's civic and political participation is crucial to sustaining a healthy democracy. Women's collective action, whether it's through social movements, political coalitions, or economic movements, has throughout history driven legal, policy, and social change across the globe. Yet, as you can see here, according to the World Economic Forum, the United States has fallen behind most established democracies with respect to women's empowerment and representation. As you can see, last year we were 37th, and in 2022, this year, we have fallen to 38th, according to the World Economic Forum. So when we look at our government, we can clearly see that women are underrepresented. And this gender gap in political representation not only affects the health of American democracy overall, but it also directly impacts those women because it means that their needs and their priorities are historically not represented. You know, the government is not responding to the needs and the priorities of women in this country. And so it's directly impacting their ability to live the life that they want to live. And so we've discovered that this same thing is happening for young people. When we don't vote, our voices and our priorities are not heard and not addressed. And so Priya does a lot of AIT's original polling data. And so when we polled in October 2021, we found that our data reflects this phenomenon of the enthusiasm gap. We found that young people were far less motivated to vote than older generations. So Priya, can you help us understand this data a little bit and talk about what are the potential impacts of this enthusiasm gap? And what does this mean for American democracy if this continues long term?
Yeah, I think this tends to be a confusing thing to a lot of people because it's often kind of contrasted with the fact that, you know, Gen Z, young millennials tend to also be the most politically kind of aware and active generation, like overall. And so I think really where this comes from, and I'm sure a lot of you kind of see this in your own lives, right? You probably have friends who are super politically aware, maybe even you guys are as on top of all of this stuff, but you don't really want to vote because everything is kind of value, right? We're all values-based more as kind of younger voters, right? We're not necessarily tied to political parties. We're voters under 30 are a lot more likely to be like independents or not see themselves as tied to a party. And so we often kind of get stuck in this weird place of both being hyper engaged, but no one's kind of coming to us, right? I don't know if any of you, for a campaign that you didn't sign up for, like, right? Like how many of you have actually ever been contacted by a campaign where you live? Like have had a candidate call your house, send you a letter, right? Maybe if you are living at home, you're getting letters sent to your parents, right? But you're maybe not getting mail to you until at least, so I live in New York, and I know in New York, the way they kind of do things is that you have to be what they call a triple prime voter, which means you have to have voted in 3 elections for them to even put you on a contact list, right? So I'm 26, so this is like my first year of being a triple prime voter. So previously to that, no one would have ever called me or contacted me. Now I'm contacted all the time, right? So that's a huge gap of if you're 18 to 29 and you've only voted maybe once or twice, no one's calling you. And so that, I think that's where a lot of that enthusiasm gap is coming from, right? We're all paying attention, we're all active and engaged, but no one's kind of putting us into that pipeline and funnel of voting and other forms of civic engagement, which is kind of why, if you look at things like the Harvard Youth Poll and stuff like that, right, you'll see that young people are a lot more likely to be volunteering. Maybe they're organizing their workplaces, they're doing, right, they're talking to their friends about politics, but they're not doing these other kind of more active forms of engagement, whether that's voting, volunteering on a campaign, or, going to protests, or really organizing, like doing more of that organizing work.
Yeah, exactly. However, with recent developments, we found that the tides might be turning a little bit, at least for women voters and for young voters. So when we polled again in July of this year, Priya, can you explain a little bit about the differences that we found recently in this last month?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think as we've probably all realized at this point that Roe and, the Dobbs decision has been an absolute game changer, right? I don't know how many of you kind of were paying attention to what happened in Kansas last week with their ballot initiative. They had really massive voter turnout, a lot of that driven by a generational difference, right? Young people, anyone kind of, I think it was under 40 or under 50, were massively against that, repealing that ballot initiative that was protecting the right to an abortion in the state of Kansas. And so I think really that so much of this stuff here with abortion and Roe is really that for, those of us who are of childbearing age or going to be of childbearing age within the next few years, right? This is an issue that is much more salient to us than it is to someone, right? Our parents or grandparents, folks in their 50s, 60s who are voting more. But obviously their bodies are not on the line in the same way that ours are as, 18 to 40, 30, 35, whatever you want to use here, right? In this case, 18 to 29-year-old voters, particularly among women. I think these numbers, I think, are women, that motivation has completely changed the way we're looking at going to the polls in 2022. Sorry. Right. So back in September, when a lot of this stuff was kind of seeming like it was going to happen, not going to happen, it seemed like a possibility, but everyone, I think, was sort of in this place of like, oh, it's never going to happen. Like, we're not going to overturn 50 years of Supreme Court precedent. And so they weren't really thinking too much about it. And now that this has actually happened, we're saying, okay, this is a place where legislation can really make a difference, right? Like, you see it on the state level in Kansas. There's a lot of other states, whether it's Michigan or places like that where the governor, the state and local races can make a big difference on this issue. And I think that's going to change the way people turn out in 2022, even if they aren't normally paying attention to what's going on in kind of a non-presidential or non-federal level.
Absolutely. And that's part of the work that Priya and the team at All In Together do, is putting together these legislative breakdowns so we can help women understand the bills that are going to be directly impacting them and influencing their lives. And so part of Priya's hard work is going through all those bills and figuring out what exactly this means for us and what exactly this means for women across the country. And so we try to, engage women in the political process, particularly encouraging them to vote in these traditional and engage in these traditional methods. And one of the ways that Priya is able to do that is break down these bills that are coming up so people can clearly understand what this actually means for them. Because it's very difficult sometimes to wade through all that language and all this Supreme Court precedent. And we really want to know, what does this mean for my life and for my future? And what can I do about it? And so part of our work at AIT is helping women understand the context and also giving them the tools to pursue change in whatever issue area they are passionate about. And that's really what Guadalupe is helping women do. And so I'll turn it over to her, because we know that the recent Roe decision is affecting motivation to vote. But we also wanted to know what other issues are important to young voters this election cycle. And so we asked that question as well. And our data shows that young voters are particularly interested in COVID, rising prices, climate change, and healthcare costs, in addition to reproductive rights. And so some of these issues are federal issues, some are local issues, and some we can address from both ends. And so, Guadalupe, could you tell us a little bit about what we as individuals can realistically do to affect change in these issue areas?
Sure. Thank you, Erin. I just want to start with this question on how to create change and acknowledge that a lot of times people think that they need to do something so big, so great, because things are so bad. And if they are just doing a little bit, it doesn't count. So just to really share this idea that all change and all impact, it's important. We shouldn't feel overwhelmed and think like, I need to solve all the things, all this list of things right now by myself. So to create change, we need to have intention, like intentionally know that things are not right and that we want to change them. And we also have a set of values that guide our actions, right? For instance, climate change, right? My values say that nature is important, that I should live a sustainable life, that I don't want to pollute. I have a set of values and I have the intention, and I know that the current situation is not okay. So I plan to do something to change that situation. So I think it's important to think in 3 levels of change. We have like personal change, which is all the values and the behaviors that I'm going to do by myself and I can do and control. We can all do that. We can all change our attitudes or behaviors or things. If I believe in climate change, maybe I'm going to recycle. I'm going to put a bin in my home, separate everything. I'm going to do everything I can do. And we have to recognize that that's really, really important, because if everyone did the same, this would be a different situation. So in terms of voting, for instance, if I believe that there's a democratic system, if I believe that my voice matters, if I believe that I deserve fair representation, I'm going to go and vote and make everything I can do to vote. And that's important. And that's enough. It's that if that's what you want to do. The second level would be a community level, right? How we behave with others, how we share our things, our intentions, our values with others, how we want to support others in their journey. So let's say, again, recycling, then maybe I'm going to, educate my family, and we're all going to be in this plan about recycling. And then I'm going to teach friends, neighbors. I'm going to volunteer at a place where they are recycling or educating people, right? The same with voting. I believe my voice matters. I'm going to vote. And then I think that everyone's voice matters, and I want to empower other people to do the same. And I don't have to start like super big. I can do it with friends. I can do it with family. I can do it with neighbors. I can volunteer at some place. I can share information. And here it's, I think about capacity. We're so different and we have different capacities. So there's people here who have lived here for a long time that cannot vote because they have a visa. They are green card holders. So maybe they cannot do it personally, but they can inspire and educate others, share information, encourage others to go and vote because they know that their voices matter, right? And then we go to the third level, which is more like structural, where we're trying to change institutions, to change systems. This is a little bit more complex because we are trying to create something. So sometimes we cannot do it ourselves. We need to have a network of support. So in this case, let's say, again, recycling, which is a very basic example, but important. Maybe at the structural level, I go to the transfer station near my town and they close early, and that regulation is causing that people cannot go and, recycle, and that's why they are not recycling. So I'm thinking about changing a system that I think it's not working into a more inclusive system, saying, why don't we have more hours there, right? If we're doing this with voting, we're thinking about all these new legislations that are passing that sometimes are unfair and are not open or inclusive or allowing everyone to vote and to share their voice. So I'm going to try to change that at that level. So another thing that's important is that it doesn't need to be like I'm going from the personal to the community to the structural. It depends on your capacity, and it depends on that we're in a different stages in life. So some people start in a structural level, trying to change the legislation, and that's completely fine. Some people start in a personal level, just going there and voting, and that's completely fine. So just to share that in AIT, we believe that civic engagement and participation, it's a path, not only for change, but for personal leadership, and that it's really broad. It's not only going and voting or running for office. It can also be volunteering, right? It can also be sharing your experience. It can also be writing an op-ed. It can also be helping your neighbor, taking care of your neighbor's kids if your neighbor needs to go and vote. So to create change, just thinking these different levels, identify what are the things that are important to you. Where do you want to create change? What's your capacity and how do you want to do it?
Yes, thank you, Guadalupe. And sometimes when I look at this chart, it makes me overwhelmed. And sometimes I feel like this. As young people and as college students, I think we've probably all been told that we are living in unprecedented times about 1,000 times. And so sometimes it really does feel like this. So Guadalupe, when everything feels really not fine, we know that it's important to identify and set your own issue priorities. So could you talk a little bit about how you go about picking just one issue to focus on when it feels like there are so many to tackle?
Yes, and I share that feeling, Erin. Sometimes it's like, oh no, everything's falling apart. What am I going to do? And some people, they choose like the denial or depression, it's like, oh no, there's nothing I can do. And some people feel overwhelmed. There's so much I need to do. I think that it's important to remember we're all humans. We're doing our best here. We're trying to help. I cannot solve everything at the same time, right? And also realize that we have limited capacity. We have specific interests, right? So I think the most important thing is to find something that goes with your values, that reflects your values, something that you are passionate about, something that's so important to you that you're going to make some time and commit, and that even when it gets difficult or hard, that thing keeps you, it's like a light, like a North Star. It's like, I love this so much that it doesn't matter, right? I'm doing this because I love it and because I believe in this change. It's important to find something where you may have either some experience, some expertise. And when I say experience, it's maybe because you live that, or you know about that, or someone close to you knows about that, right? Or maybe it's something that you want to learn about. That's important. And the third thing, it would be urgency, or I would say more timing. So something, talking about more like policy, there's a timing for things. Maybe there's a cause that it's incredibly important for you, but maybe right now is not the right timing. If you want to create like a movement or something, but if it's something that's urgent for you, that in this time it's like a priority, then you're gonna dedicate some time and effort to do that. So if you only find one or two topics and you want to work in one topic or one area or two, that's completely fine, right? If you only have capacity for 1 hour, a couple of hours a week, that's completely fine, right? We're all in this together. We're doing our best. I'm sure that other people is taking care of the other things you're not working on right now. And this needs to be something that brings you joy, that it's meaningful for you, and that you can realistically do. It's better to say, I'm going to devote 2 hours a week and actually do it and feel good with yourself than say, I'm going to devote 10 hours and then you feel bad because you were not committed to what you said at the beginning. So just remember that, and it's very important, something that's aligned with your values, aligned with your capacity, and that makes you feel like you are creating change or it's meaningful.
Exactly. And I think when you have such a passion for the issue that you choose, and it aligns so closely with your values, it doesn't always feel like a chore. It doesn't feel like, oh, shoot, I have to go volunteer 2 hours this week. Maybe it's even something that you're looking forward to that gets you out of your house or out of your apartment, because you know that even though you can't solve climate change alone, you're really passionate about recycling, and you're specifically passionate about the recycling that's happening in your neighborhood. So it's important to recognize that you can start very, very small. And there are ways to affect change just within your daily life, your family's daily life, and your immediate community. And that's just as valuable as people going to Washington and marching on the Hill and meeting with members of Congress. That's super important, but the work you do on a daily basis that's based in your values and your passion and the life that you're actually living day to day is incredibly important, not only for affecting real change, but also for giving you hope to continue working on these issues and continuing to engage. Because I think that the worst thing we can do is become apathetic. When we see all of these issues confronting us and we feel overwhelmed, sometimes it's easy to step back and say, I'm just not going to engage. But it's better, as Guadalupe is saying, to try and pick one issue where you feel like you can make an incremental change. And once you see that incremental change starting to happen, it's just going to light a fire underneath you and you're going to want to keep going. And so how exactly are we going to do that? Basically, once you've set your issue priorities based on, the advice that Guadalupe has given, it's just time to trust yourself. Your lived experience is your expertise. At AIT, we really try to highlight that for the women that come to our programs. Many of these women have other life challenges that they're dealing with. When AIT was first founded, we specifically worked with survivors of domestic violence and intimate partner violence by partnering with shelters and domestic violence organizations. And so we found that while women are experiencing these life challenges, these experiences are their expertise. And so we just need to trust ourselves and leverage our own personal experience. And so I think that's a great transition because Vashti has done this. And so Vashti, could you tell us a little bit about your personal experience from your background, then engaging with AIT, and now your role at Madisonville Education and Assistance Center?
Sure. Thank you, Erin. Hi, everyone. I think, as I was thinking about the conversation today, I was thinking I have the benefit of many years. It's been a long time since I was, college student thinking about where my place in the world is going to be. And at the time, I was not particularly politically engaged. I was active. I was in student senate. I went to, campaign rallies. I will not tell you what campaigns they were, but I was at campaign rallies. But I also I remember being very specifically making the decision not to join like the college Dems or right, like whatever party that I thought at the time was where my affiliation landed, because I was like, I don't think that's like too far. I don't want to be like, I didn't want to put myself in this box, right? I wanted to be able to say like, these are the things I care about, and this is how I'm going to make my decisions. And it's not because of any type of affiliation. I was very much committed at the time to being an independent. And so I was still trying to find my way. And over time, I think through my professional experiences as well as my personal experience, I started to figure out what that avenue looked like for me. And, you know, as the AI team has been talking about, it looks different for everyone. And so I say, you know, without any hesitation, that you are not going to see my name on a ballot, because that's not where I'm going to stake my claim as an advocate for policy and systems change. But as someone who has worked in the nonprofit sector for the last 20 years, I recognize the need for systems and policy change. So how do I take the wealth of knowledge that I've gained in practice and in proximity to communities, as well as the communities that I've been a part of, to actually help move the needle? And so I think part of that is understanding the landscape of the community that you're in and figuring out where you can actually tap into it. And so I'm in Cincinnati. It's a what we call like a big little city. Like it's very much wants to be a small town, but it's not anymore. But because of that, there are some things that are fairly easy, like getting on the calendar of a city council person is not particularly challenging. You maybe the first time you don't get the council person and you get their assistant, or their chief of staff. But what you learn is those are the people you really need to talk to anyway, because they're the ones who are setting the agendas and really putting together the scope of work for, here are the things you care about, and here are the people in the community who are experts in that area that you need to surround yourself with and understand their perspective. And that is really an opportunity for you to be in a position of influence without actually being in the political arena. I think for me, really understanding what that looks like and understanding what issues where I need to go to the city, what issues where I need to be thinking about who in the county issue, because we have some things. So I think one of the ways that probably most people have seen the most young people really, really activated over the last couple of years would have been kind of on the hills or like, you know, kind of with the Black Lives Matter movement, and then particularly the conversation around, right, defund the police. And here in Cincinnati, the protests and the folks having those conversations, it was majority young folks, and they were activated, they were organized, but they weren't necessarily completely informed. And so they were showing up at city council meetings, making, you know, really strong demands, but they didn't have a full scope of like actually who made the decisions. And so while the city did have some decision-making power, there were actually some of the things that they were asking for in their demands that the city actually had no control over. And so really knowing where to target your energy is really, really important in the process. So that when you come out swinging and saying, these are the things that we want as a community and we want to see happen, that you're making sure that you're not wasting your breath asking somebody for something that they can't give you. And I think one of the things about the AIT fellowship is that it really gave me the frame of mind to like, don't forget about that background work. Like, don't forget to figure out where to direct your energy and how to approach it. And knowing that there's so many things that many of us want to change and want to see better in our community. How do we do that when we're a lot of times feeling like one little person, right? It feels very much like a David and Goliath situation. And so for me, I work in a small nonprofit. We got a small budget. I got a small staff. I feel like I am just like chipping away at the tiniest bit of pieces of change in my community. And so the decision I made in having conversations with some colleagues and friends was, why are we doing this by ourselves? Why aren't we doing it together? And so what we ended up doing is starting a collaborative of 8 leaders, 8 Black leaders in Cincinnati who decided that we were going to come together and start a collective to focus on the core issues that we think are disproportionately affecting the Black community in our city. And we were going to not waste time. We weren't going to meet about it for a year. We were going to hold ourselves accountable, and we were going to immediately starting pushing for change. And the results have been really amazing. And thinking about how do we approach this in a way where it's not about us? And so one of the things we really focused on was, we know this is going to take longer than probably some of us want to keep working. So we also we really need to focus on the development of the leaders who are coming under right below us. So the first thing we did was put together a fellowship program where we're going to work with a couple of emerging leaders, and we are going to be the folks who they are going to work with. We are going to give them the benefit of our knowledge as leaders, the things that folks didn't ever necessarily teach us along the way, to help build them up so they don't have to jump through as many hoops. And really hoping, as we start to catalyze more and more leaders into a movement, that we really can push the lever for the folks who have the ability to change policy, the ability to decide where the money goes in our community, to change the policies and practices at the city and the county. And so I think a lot of this is, don't go at it alone. There are other people who care about what you care about, and finding those people to become a part of a community of support is probably one of the most important leadership skills that you can ever really have. And I'll stop there so that we can have some time to hopefully do Q&A or whatever else finishes up the rest of our time together.
Yes, thank you so much, Vashti, for giving us that great example. And I think you hit on some really important things, that it can be hard to stay motivated and inspired to keep fighting. But one of the things that you mentioned is you're investing in the next generation of leaders. So you know that you might not have the capacity or the motivation to do this forever, but you know that the people who are coming next, you want to pass on those skills, those tools, and those values, and help them develop that passion. And so I think that really speaks to what you're saying, that you don't have to go it alone. You can find the people immediately surrounding you to support you in your civic journey. And you can also invest in the people who are coming after you. You can share what you have learned in your civic journey with younger generations. Even those who can't vote yet, there's so much we can still do before we turn 18 and vote. Or, as Guadalupe mentioned, there are many people living in this country who can't legally vote, but still can have a significant influence in their communities. And so one of the things we try to do at AIT as well is to provide people with these avenues that they can engage and affect change, even if it's not voting, even if they can't directly cast a ballot. They can help people in their communities vote. They can help people in their communities understand the issues, and that's incredibly important too. And I think one other thing you said that I want to reiterate is that, work smarter, not necessarily harder. And you mentioned that you don't want to be asking the wrong people for the wrong things. And so that's part of what Guadalupe does at AIT in our grassroots workshops, is she helps people understand where they should be directing their energy. So if it's a local issue that rests on the city level, you want to know that so you can contact the right representatives. If it's a federal issue, being discussed in Congress and Senate, you want to know who represents you at the federal level so you can engage with those people. And so I think, Vashti, you've just really summarized so well both of these things, and really have given us an example of how you translate your personal experience and your expertise into a movement that you want to share with others. So thank you so much. Definitely stay connected with us. These are our social medias, and we have wonderful Alexis, who's on the line with us today, who runs all of our social media. She's posting great content. It's always nonpartisan content. As we mentioned, we are a strictly nonpartisan organization. And so we're really just trying to give people the facts so that they can figure out what that means for them, where they fall on this issue. We never tell women how to vote or what to advocate for or what position they should take. We just give them the tools to do so and try and send them out on their own civic journey, and support them along the way. And thank you, Hope, for copying and pasting our voter resources webpage in the chat. If you want to follow that link, you can find all of our resources there.